Here we go. We are here with we are here in quarantine with the fabulous Mr. Jeremy Pelt. Your Peltness.
How you doing, man?
I'm good, man. I'm holed up here in New Hampshire. Had a
Oh, you're in New Hampshire. I didn't know that.
friend of my lady's has a spot, and I've got my own room where I can shed 24/7, and I'm like recording and stuff, and just
Mm,
musicking out, checking out all the records I was supposed to check out a long time ago.
good.
What's going on? Where are you now?
I'm at home.
Oh,
You're just trying to you know, make the best of a terrible time, right?
that's exactly what we were just saying to each other, to people in this house.
hmm
What are you noticing in New York being there right now?
Quite honestly, I noticed a lot of motherfuckers just not taking it seriously. You know,
Yeah.
it's uh, it's alarming. When especially when you're doing your part, and you're doing everything that they ask, and yet people are still walking around and joking around, and nobody's got masks or anything like that. And it's a lot. I just before I came on here with you, just was talking to a friend of mine. She's a doctor out in Antwerp, and that's not even her specialty. She doesn't deal with it, but I mean, all you know, MDs know the anatomy and everything, right? So she's
Right.
been relegated to the COVID, squad, I guess, for lack of a better word. And I mean, she's just, I checked in with her just a couple minutes ago, and she's just overwhelmed. She's been working 3 days in a row, um, and she was just writing about looking at, patients in the eye and seeing their fear because they don't know whether they're going to live or die. I mean, it's unimaginable. You know,
Yeah. Yeah.
it really
It's
is.
it
I mean, you
seems to
can't.
be
I mean, we see little snippets. They have the news channels, and they have snippets of nurses and whatnot, and and people crying and whatnot, and you get a sense of their fear too. And this was somebody that I know personally. I mean, we used to date a long time ago, and she's just like, I mean, she's just overwhelmed.
yeah, it seems as though it's all hands on deck for COVID. And I heard from a friend of my lady's that is in medicine. I can't remember exactly what they do, but they were saying that if you have any sort of surgery that's like the only surgeries that are happening are absolute life or death surgeries. Everything else is completely put off, and it's all hands on
hmm
COVID-19. Pretty much across the entire country, if not the world, right now, right?
hmm
And I saw you posted something of a bunch of people outside chilling, no masks on. Like
It's crazy, man.
it's unbelievable, and it's already affected. And I think with this edition of the podcast, I've had some recorded before the quarantine, but I think I'm going to put some of these out sooner because people are. It's more relevant to what's hopefully more relevant to just these times, right? And I was going to ask you, what was your experience? We've lost a bunch of incredible elders just because of this virus, which is horrible. Obviously, the great Ellis Marsalis and Wallace Roney, Bucky Pizzarelli, and Mike Longo, and all these different people. What was your experience with Wallace like?
Wallace was he was like a sage, I mean, he was somebody that not and I spoke about this yesterday on an Instagram rant. Um I think, the thing with Wallace is he was my experience with Wallace was he was always supportive. Wallace at the end of the day was your typical jazz fanboy geek. That's what he was. You know what I mean? Till to the day he died. I mean, he would sit over there and talk to you about trumpets, and he was excited, and he would always tell you why Martin was the best, and Martin was the same kind that Miles played. and we just go back and forth, talk about things. And then, if you had any kind of musical questions, I mean, he was like an encyclopedia.
Yeah, that's what it seemed for me. I only played with him a couple of times, but every time I remember we did this one thing at William Patterson, like your sweatshirt,
Hmm.
and him and Mike Ladon were talking about all the piano players that played with Miles, and they were going back and forth with their opinions and stuff. And it was just me and Victor Gould and I were just sitting there loving it, like learning,
Hmm.
so passionate about every note that these guys played.
Hmm.
And you found him to be like extremely encouraging for a younger trumpet player like you coming up?
Yeah, I mean, he wasn't without his opinions. I mean, he's got those. I think depend on how you came at him. I mean, I think he saw. And he's never told me this, but it's some of the things that I'm old enough to start to see. I think he saw him himself in me.
Right.
In the sense of when he came out. I mean, not when he came out, but this by and large the stuff that was written about him, which is why it's also sad that he's gone, is because everybody just pigeonholed him all the time,
Right.
all the time. Every writer, everything was about Miles, and they took that for they took that ball and ran with it. You know what I mean? Because see, one of the things is when he never shied away of talking about Miles because he wore that like a badge. His involvement and his knowing Miles and his and Miles's acceptance of him. Anybody would
Yeah.
really. Shit, I'm hanging at Miles's house. Oh shit, can I come? No. you know, you know. So when he's in the in crowd, yeah, of course you're gonna hold that. And I think that people, writers and whatnot, got the wrong idea of it, um, and really just pigeonholed him. And he saw that in me, because I mean, to a great extent, to not a great extent, but to an extent, if I look at any review of me, it's always gonna mention Freddie Hubbard.
Right.
Always gonna mention, Lee Moore, so you can't really get away from it. And and it's a fight. And so he saw that more so in me than anybody else that was coming around the same time I was, if that makes sense. You
Right.
know, of which I basically came in. It was kind of the timing of my arrival was and whatever kind of fame or success came with that was uncontested for a few years, because I mean, really before me it was Nicholas, you know, and so you had that generation, and then after that it would have to be me,
Right.
and then after me was then you had the Ambroses and the Sean Jones and everybody. So at that time Wallace was it was there was a lot of buzz around when I got on the scene, and a lot of Wallace's people that Wallace considered to be good friends of his were the ones that were kind of constantly telling him. So Vincent Herring was always in his ear. Vincent and Wallace were very tight,
Yeah. That's the gig
and
that I
so
played at William Patterson, was the two of those guys together. Yeah.
right.
I saw. Oh, excuse me.
And so Vincent would tell Wallace about me, and Wallace, he was always listening. He was always interested in who was out there. So I mean, we got a chance. We talked many times.
Hmm.
We hung whenever we could. He was cool.
Wow. And how about Mike Longo and Bucky and Ellis Marsalis?
Okay. I only played with Mike one time, and it was funny because somebody posted. I think Carlos might have posted something on Facebook of a concert that I did when I first moved to New York, or around there. I think the concert was in 2000. I moved in '98. There used to be these concerts put on by Paul West
Yeah.
called the Henry Street Settlement concerts, and everybody did one. Nicholas did one when he was, relatively new to the scene. Certainly, Faddis did one. Because it all focused around Dizzy Gillespie's music, and the gig was you were playing with the string orchestra and the rhythm section, you know,
Yeah.
and so that's what I was. That was when I played with Mike, and you know, for whatever reason, we didn't necessarily connect in a type of way that um, was long lasting. So I don't have any really kind of. I know that I played with him,
Right.
but I don't have any stories about that. Ellis, I've never played with Ellis. I never really. I met Ellis one time, and that was very recently. It was a few years back. I was out on the road with Kenny Barron, and we were doing these summer tours, a summer tour, and we had a couple of days off in Marciac, and there was only one hip hotel, um, not even in the village of Marciac, but outside of Marciac, and that's where everybody stayed. So I think Winton was there with the big band, or not. I don't even think it was a big band. I think it was the Sept, whatever. And he had a special group where it was going to be him and his and Branford, and um, and so everybody was in the same hotel, and there was only one place to eat, at night. So everybody was there, and me and Kenny had been hanging out for lunch and dinner. So I would just be talking to Kenny and whatnot, and Ellis came up to him. I imagine, of course, they knew each other pretty well, and so that was the only time I met him. And that was really 3 years ago. You know,
Right.
um, Bucky, I played with Bucky a couple times. Bucky, we always joked around about who had the best tie on. But he was a Brooks Brothers fanatic.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and I was in the Brooks Brothers and in my suits and whatnot, and so we'd have on the same, tie. We would do these concert things. They still exist. Jazz, different various jazz societies will have like a jazz weekend, and it's usually something that's put on by or organized by Ken Popowski or Howard Alden, and has those type of the players that really embrace and know the American songbook. So it's always Harry Allen, it's Kenny Popowski, it's Howard Alden, a lot of different players. And I did,
Joel Forbes on bass and
well, it wasn't Joe, but he certainly could have been in there. But the ones I did, I forgot who was on bass. Actually, no, it might have been on one of those. But certainly, that type of
Mike Carn, John Pizzarelli, along with Bucky,
who
kind of
caught?
thing. I
Not
said
no, not John. Bucky though. Bucky was definitely on a couple of them, and so we got a chance to hang. Bucky was a lighthearted cat. Um, he didn't strike me as overly talkative, so I mean, people would joke around with him, and those were people that knew him a long time, and he would go along with the joke, but he never he, he wasn't like outgoing, particularly outgoing, and I don't mean that in the sense of him being mean or standoffish. It's just that wasn't what I saw his character to be,
right.
but he was very fun and good natured to be around.
Wow. Yeah. Well, that's more or less what I've heard from everybody that was close with him, and it's got to be a particularly. It's always a difficult time when we have a loss, but also with the circumstances that are going on, the restrictions that presents. If anybody's listening, closely associated with all those masters, we are, really terribly sorry. And I think it's there has been a beautiful outpouring of love for people that were affected and related with all these people. What do you? Nobody knows what's going to happen, obviously, but what do you predict for yourself? What are you doing through this quarantine? What do you see on the horizon for you? Just general thoughts.
You got to use this time wisely. Um, there's a lot going on, and everybody. is going through the same thing, obviously, but then there are different variations of the same thing, right?
Yeah.
You're holed up in New Hampshire. It's not like you can go around and then be going to the pub,
There you go. Your
staying
audio
close.
is so much better, right? That whatever you did, just right, stay right there.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
You're holed up in New Hampshire. I'm holed up here in New York. There's added things like I can't see my kids. So I mean, that really sucks because at this point it's been over a month, and who knows how much longer it'll be. So you have to kind of fill your day with things that'll stimulate you and keep you sane. I mean, for me, I'm watching old movies that I might have seen 10 million times, but watch them again. Um, definitely working on music, but it's a slow period in terms of output. So, but my whole thing about composing is not to force anything. Been doing a lot of lessons. Been doing that. I've been investigating and looking into the stock market and really trying to study that
Yeah.
because the next thing is one of the most eye-opening things about this is really figuring out how to make money work for you in the event that something catastrophic happens again. Because everybody's feeling the bite of it, right? Cats out here, got to pay rent. They don't know how they're gonna do it. They don't know where they're gonna be. This shit is just, decimating the scene. It's decimating everything. So you have to really figure out how it is that you're going. We will all make it past this, but I think it starts now in terms of figuring out how to ensure yourself when things like this happen. Or it doesn't even have to be this catastrophic. It doesn't have to be on the scale. You could just lose a whole bunch of gigs, but you still want to be afloat. You know what I mean? So it's really just trying to figure out how to set yourself up for that.
Absolutely. Quick question: Are you holding the phone from the bottom right now?
Am I covering it?
I think
How's
you're
this
covering the mic.
now?
Try again.
I'm talking. I was holding it from the bottom, but now I'm just holding it.
Ah, there it was. Wherever you hit this one spot, and then it's like crystal clear. And I
Is
think
it
people
crystal
were up.
clear now?
Yeah, it's perfect.
Okay.
Sorry to be. No, but everybody could, hear what you were saying before about, just working out different ways to have money work for you, and just so when something catastrophic happens, it's not necessarily catastrophic for you personally, whoever you are, or whatever your situation is. Um, yeah, I think a lot of younger musicians are exploring, obviously a lot of older musicians too, but a lot of younger musicians are trying to figure out, like, okay, how can I make technology work for me? How can I bring in revenue and streaming concerts? And do you think in the future, after this is over and the clubs are back up and everybody's out and about, do you think that streaming concerts are going to be another form of revenue that's going to be sustained?
I think it is already.
Yeah, I mean, besides smalls and besides live venues and stuff like that, do you think it's going to become more of a thing where people are doing stuff from their, like a tiny desk concert from their house, like what people are doing now?
Uh, you know, by and large, people still want to feel something,
Right.
and that's always going to be there. That's always going to have, a certain type of impact, or else, I mean, it's already tried and true. So you said Smalls, there's Lincoln Center too. So I mean, there's places. I mean, what's the place? Bim House in Amsterdam. They post everything to YouTube and whatnot. So I mean, there's and they live stream it. So I mean, there's revenue to be had doing that. I don't know. It could be a bigger thing in the future. I hope not. Because I don't want to get, I don't want to get into a situation where it's like, oh, good, I don't have to travel anywhere. Let me just have the band over my house, and we'll go ahead and play whatever song we're gonna play. we'll kill it right here in my living room, and everybody can just go home. You know what I mean?
That's like takes the entire fun out of everything.
It does, and also it's not really sustainable from a musician standpoint either. Yeah, I mean, in an isolated way, you talk about the tiny desk concerts. Yeah, okay, you get there, and who's on? I've never done one of those, but I mean, they don't have. You can tell they don't have an extensive crew of people behind the scenes. It maybe one or two people, and then you go ahead and do your thing musically, and you generate your own excitement, and that's great. But a large part of the satisfaction of what we do comes from feeling the energy of the audience.
Yeah, absolutely. You can't recreate, something like Smalls or, I mean, I haven't played the Vanguard yet, but places like that where it's the audience is up close and personal, and
Yeah,
yeah,
well,
and
you
I
need
mean, yeah, go ahead.
no, you need that, and so yeah, with streaming and everything, yeah, that could be a good side hustle, but not for the likes of you and me. Um, And maybe I'm naive about that because I mean, the more I think about it, if I had to think about the question for a whole night, I could come up with a whole
Right.
business, thing of how it could be, sustainable for me and you. But there's something that's going to suffer because of that.
Right. I mean, it would be great if we came out of the other side of this and people really appreciated live arts more and human contact and everything that goes along with like in-person stimulus.
Well, but you know what though? I think that one thing I'm saying is that there are a lot of people that still appreciate. I don't feel as though people especially with us being fucked up now with this whole thing, I don't feel like it was ever what we did was ever taken for granted by the fans. You know what I mean? I mean, they're just hurting as much. I've heard from several fans, on Facebook and whatnot. They were like, "Yeah, man, we were supposed to see you in Paris, or we were supposed to see you in Spain, and all this." And they're itching to get to something to give it. So I don't think that we've been taken for granted, and this is somehow some kind of comeuppance for anybody to realize. I think people know what's at stake.
Yeah, absolutely. And there is a listening off audience that's definitely suffering. I mean, you can tell when you tune into certain people's live streams and live concerts that there's like I find it to be particularly an older for jazz or bam or whatever you want to call it, an older age range that is like, oh, we really miss coming out and having a glass of wine and seeing you guys and listening and stuff like that. Sometimes I find that the younger audience in some of the clubs in New York wind up there by chance. Sometimes it's fans, it's
Wind up
people
where online or
wind up at clubs. Well, online, I'm noticing the different things between platforms. Instagram, everybody's going live all the time. There's 30-second clips. It's
yeah,
such a wild west that live concerts, like at least the stream I did on Instagram, it didn't really, people, even when we partnered with Jazz Memes, who has like 100 and some thousand followers, we held like a steady 40 people the whole time,
right.
and Facebook, you get people who, it also in your browser, you can scroll and keep that little window going so you can watch a live concert instead. But it seems like the numbers on Facebook of people, which is generally like Facebook is now quote unquote something of the older generation. So it seems like the older people may have more patience to sit and watch a concert.
Mm.
But for those people who aren't, as super familiar with your work as somebody like myself or some of the other listening audience, so talk about you getting here. You went to Berkeley, right? All that stuff, the beginnings of your time in New York.
That's a whole long conversation. They could Google that.
Yeah, you want them to Google that?
Yeah, I've done countless. Suffice it to say, I'm here.
Right, I got you. Okay.
Yeah,
So what year did you move to New York? Can we get that out of you?
98.
Okay. And since your time in the scene, have you seen anything similar like this? Was September 11th like this to the scene?
September 11th was, yeah, I was thinking about that because I saw the pictures. Um, well, not the pictures. I saw somebody sent me some kind of ad for, Andrew Cuomo saying we still love New York, and they was alluding to, like, some of the other catastrophes. Um, September 11th was not like this. September 11th, we got to remember it was isolated, and what I mean by it was isolated was that this was something that was unique to this city.
Right.
You know what I mean? It didn't shut down, anything in California, in Iowa, and you know what I mean? It was it was unique. Well, I'm sorry. Let me correct myself. It was unique to this city, and it was unique to DC
Right.
and Pennsylvania, right?
Central Pennsylvania. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Um, but other than that, yeah, it was definitely a commotion. But what I remember about it was that everybody was stunned, as was I. And I had just gotten back from Japan on September 10th. And Carlos actually called me on September 11th in the morning to make sure that I was back, because he's like, man, planes are going into the buildings and shit. And I was like, what? You know? Um, but even the days following that, um, the process for repairing the city was pretty swift, you know, in
Right.
comparison. I mean, I was just talking about this like 2 weeks ago with Kenny Washington. We were talking because I mean that's a lot of times what New Yorkers had to compare something catastrophic with is 9/11, right?
Right.
So me and Kenny Washington were talking about that week, and we talked about like someplace like you mentioned, the Vanguard. The Vanguard rarely ever closes down, and I think they might have been closed down for a couple of days. That was it. Tommy Flanagan was there that week. I do remember that.
Wow.
But other than that, I mean, it was a swift, comparatively swift kind of cleanup in terms of getting the city back in order.
Right. And you in your career thus far, do you think that's the most damage you've seen done from like a quote unquote, I don't want to even say act of God, but something larger like that? I mean, obviously there's Katrina with New Orleans, which is
Mhm.
horrendous, and there's so many terrible world disasters. But in your experience, have you ever seen the scene come to a screeching halt? Anything like this?
No, no. I mean, the other thing about it, which I forgot to mention about 9/11 was, um, and for maybe, as I recall it, maybe a day or two, or not even that, probably even a matter of a week or so. It was, people were afraid to fly. Nobody was really getting the planes. I was actually one of my oldest friends. Talking about has to be my oldest friend. He was a year older than me. We were babies. Our parents knew each other, like that kind of old friend. Um, he was getting married. I think that like it was like a couple days after 9/11. you know, or maybe he got married in like the end of September, whatever it was. And I was supposed to go down there, and he wanted me to play the Michigan fight song because he went to Michigan State, and I just had to nut on that whole thing. I was like, first of all, I don't think they were allowing people to fly. I think that's what it was too,
Right.
for a period of time. So that's something that's kind of parallel to this. Um, a month after 9/11 is when I flew. I flew in October, and I was going overseas to Ireland. I had to do the Cork Jazz Festival,
Right.
and so I know I kind of deviated from your question, but it just popped in my mind that that was something that was parallel to this. But
Right. No, that's
any
totally
other kind
relevant.
of natural disaster, I mean, I've been in earthquakes, I've been in all types of things, and yeah, I mean, they're natural disasters, and well, obviously we know 9/11 wasn't natural, but um, it was something that was there was an understanding of how to repair it.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Earthquakes happen. Okay, there ain't nothing any of us could do about an earthquake except for just sit there and be shaken. And then it lasts a relatively short amount of time, maybe 2 minutes at the most,
Yeah.
right? And then you're done with it.
And then the physical damage is done. It's right there. It's time to clean that up.
Exactly. You know what I mean? You got insurance, you got you got all types of things that clean that up. 9/11, that was more of a psychological, there was a lot that was going on right there. But at the end of the day, you knew how to clean that up.
Yeah.
And you identified what the problem was.
Right. It's very
And you,
physical and
yeah,
tangible and all
yeah,
these things that this is not at all.
right. Yeah, exactly. So this is just like, you have too many we know what it is, and you have too many people trying to discuss a panacea for it, and try to espouse what they think is the right thing to do, and the fact of the matter is nobody fucking knows.
Yeah, exactly. And what do you want to tell, I find in a time like this, it's obviously incredibly difficult for everybody, but creative types are suffering not only financially but also from not being able to perform, and some feel as though they're not able to create. And like you said earlier about your compositions, not rushing composition or creation is very important. um, but I've always noticed you as somebody who's worked very hard to create their own path. You've worked extremely hard to get where you are, not only musically but career wise, image wise. You have some a sort of brand association when people know when they're going to buy your records that it's going to be, I would say, like extremely classy but real music, and pushing the boundaries. And you've got electric bands and swing bands and stuff like that. All that to say, um, you've worked very hard to refine your own thing and do your own thing. What do you want to tell musicians right now who are paralyzed by grief and are trying to, a lot of cats are struggling right now, whether it be financially or moving forward? What do you want to say to them? What's your advice?
Shit. I mean, I'm in the same boat, right? I mean, there's no. This is the great equalizer, right? Yeah, this is something that everybody, if one could take any kind of solace, it would have to be the fact that nobody's going anywhere. You know what I mean? So there's different rungs of struggling, right?
Yeah,
There's different, certainly
absolutely.
somebody, like, and I hate to bring his name up in the wake of his father died, but let's just say the idea of a Wynton Marsalis, right, who's a millionaire, um, is, I mean, death is, the terrible thing
He's
that
struggling with a loss and something
yeah,
awful,
yeah,
but you're
but
talking the financial.
we're talking about the business aspect of it,
Right.
you know, I'm sure he'll make it through.
Right,
But
exactly.
still, there's a lot of burden that people bear, right? So he's not making it through, but he's also got the he's also on the top of a heap of an organization, right?
Yeah,
And
totally.
also his big band. Everybody who was guaranteed work throughout the rest of the year, and of course it's not his fault, but
Yeah,
that still weighs on you. So I mean, you have to kind of figure out a way to mitigate that, right?
yeah,
I mean, even for me, in a way less, um, lesser extent. I've got a quintet that's supposed to be out on the road next week
right.
until the middle of May.
And they're
You
all
know,
looking to you for, everybody's looking for a leader. And like you said, with Jazz at Lincoln Center and the big band and stuff like that, Winton has the weight of is the family stuff going on right now, but he's also got an entire thing that he's cultivated and built, and people looking for direction. And that was, I thought the address that he did was great. The thing where he was on Zoom hanging out with Christian McBride and Jeff Hamilton, and he was just telling stories and really jolly to people, and really nice, and people were really into it. Just as a side note, but
I
continue.
didn't see that. But I mean, I'll say, when you get back to when you talk about advice and trying to be avuncular to the younger musician, I would just say, this is the time to really just use your time wisely and think about your next step. You know what I mean? And you had, and this is testing everybody's resilience. You know what I mean? I think the truest words, sometimes we say things like, "You're not alone. We're in this together," and then there's, is the whatever instance it is, those words might seem trite,
Right.
uh, because we're not faced with something like a pandemic. But in this sense, we are, and we are. When I say you ain't the only one, I mean it, and I can
Right.
back that up because there's nobody sneaking around to be like, yeah, I'm about to do this gig right now. No, everything's shut the fuck down. So I mean, really,
There was a little bit of that, right? There was like a couple days there where it was in the very beginning where people were like, "I'm still going to go out and do this gig," and
well, yeah. I
other
mean,
people were like, "Are you nuts?"
hey man, look, when you see the writing on the wall, but
Yeah. Right.
yeah, the point is we're in it right now. So you know, it there's no kind of advice that I can impart when I'm in the same level as you are or the next person is. You know what I mean?
Right.
We're
Yeah.
we're cultivating our own ways and our own advice right now. All I could say is, all right, just keep working at what you do, which is a trite thing to say because what the hell else are you gonna do? You know what I mean? It's
Right.
just like you gotta do what you are going to naturally do. But I mean, this is an experience that I've never been through, that you've never been through, that people twice our age haven't been through.
Right.
So, I mean, this is something new for all of us. So, this is something that in 10 years down the line, when 20 years, 30 years, 40 years, I mean, I'll be in my 80s, 40 years down the line. And God bless if I'm still alive. This will be something that I'll tell everybody. Oh man, I remember back in 2020. Yeah, man, you weren't even born yet, but such and such. This is
Yeah,
this
I
is
was talking about that with my lady. Like, we don't have kids or anything. You already have kids, but one day we'll have kids and we'll be like, "Yeah, the coronavirus," and we'll be like, "Oh shit, man, that was crazy." And the kids will be like,
yeah,
"Yeah, whatever. Can I get the keys?" Like, I want to
exactly.
leave.
This
Like,
this
it's not even gonna hit them like that.
this is an experience that we all share, and we will all, if we stay safe, will emerge to be able to talk about.
It's one of those. I think it's going to be one of those words too, like the way when you say like when you say AIDS or HIV, and like just the word itself carries this whole experience that all these people. I didn't live through the beginning of AIDS or HIV, but I've heard people say that word, and other people who've lived through that experience, like it's like a huge elephant or something that walks in the room. This weight that shit. One second, that carries people down. I think COVID-19 and Corona is going to be because it's been so scarring for so many people.
Yeah, it might very well be. I mean, it also kind of, opens up, because first of all, n- unless you're a scientist, you wouldn't realize that coronavirus is actually very old, right? It has
Yeah,
been around.
for a long
So
time.
it's not like, oh my God, this is some new shit. No, this has been around. This is just that's why they call it the new coronavirus, because anytime we have a sniffle and we down for a couple of days from a cold, that is in fact a coronavirus.
Yeah, this is just a specific new one that's transferred from some
Exactly.
animals. And you know, my lady's sister is a vet, and she's like, "Oh yeah, we've seen this before, not this exact coronavirus, but we've seen similar ones
Sure.
in horses, and it's a very common thing." And I was also talking to somebody who breeds horses, and they were like, "Oh yeah, we've had mysterious ailments come into a herd and just take out a bunch of horses, and we can't figure it out." And this is unfortunately and sadly kind of the way of humanity,
Exactly.
of life, all
Mhm.
living creatures. Um, so what do you plan? So you said you're working on music and you're coming up with different ways to make your money work for you. And okay, let's say everything gets back to normal, ideal situation. we're all back working and stuff like that. What projects musically did you have kind of on the horizon? I know you just did I guess a part of a
Trio.
duo tour with George
Oh, the tour.
Cables. Yeah.
Yeah, that was something that was that's the latest record that's out right now. It's a trio album with me and Peter Washington and George Cables, and we George and I went out at the end of February until the 13th of March to do uh, some duo concerts in Europe. What'll happen? I mean, I don't know what'll happen.
Right.
You know, let's hope so. You know, I've
No,
got
no, but
I've got
if it's cool, I'm saying if stuff gets to be to a point where things are hopefully
right.
functioning and going
Well,
on, what are you
yeah.
trying to do?
I mean, at the end of the year, I mean, look, August, I'm supposed to be at the San Jose Jazz Festival with my quintet, still playing music from Jeremy Pelt, the artist.
No, nice.
Then I'm supposed to be at the Jazz Standard doing this project with George Cables and Lewis Nash and Ray Drummond. That's in
Oof.
the middle of August. Then I'm supposed to be at Birdland. Then I'm supposed to be, heading out to do some gigs with Carl Allen in San Francisco and so there's a bunch of stuff that's happening, and then another quintet tour at the very end of September, and then the Black Art Jazz Collective. We got a tour coming up in November in Europe. So I mean, there's a lot of activity happening.
Right. That's
What
great.
that's supposed to happen.
And sorry to be, did you move the phone again? You're going into this vibe like before the beat drops on a techno track where it's like a bass scoop.
Oh,
Yeah, yeah.
sorry,
Yeah.
sorry.
No, it's all good. It's doing it again, but I'm sure it'll come back in. So the last thing that you wrote that was like themed kind of was the Rodin thing, right? Um, do you have anything? What are you writing right now? If you're writing, what is it? Is it theme based? Is it just compositions here and there that are not like in a certain theme together? Because your writing is something that I've always really admired.
It's a project that I'm working on. I'm not going to say too much about it because it's in the works, but suffice to say, it's going to be something that's going to be released with a book that I'm also working on.
Wow, cool. Okay, so we'll keep that mysterious.
Sorry, I can't say much after that. I'm sorry, but that's what it is.
No, no, it's good. It's good. It'll keep people wondering, and they'll be looking out for it. Um, yeah. Well, I think since we're not doing biographical stuff, and you've pretty much expressed your, which I understand, because once you say it, you've said it, a million times, and you don't want to say it again. Um, any other the thing I also aside from your music that I really dig is on social media you're totally like thought to pay, like you're very transparent with what you're thinking about stuff. Is there anything that you want to just free form get out to people now before we wrap it up?
Yeah, I'm so sorry. I can't. I mean, I did that yesterday, as a matter of fact, and I know that has no bearing on your show, but I mean, like, I was in. It's a mood, you know. It's like I was in a very particular mood yesterday,
Yeah.
and I just started riffing for about an hour on Instagram Live, and you can, if you, and it's probably still up there, but that's it's very much a mood, you know. So I don't know that I could do it now when you put on the spot, right? It's like that frog from the cartoon. It's like, hello, my baby. I can't do
Yeah,
it
it's like
now,
telling a comedian like be
you know.
funny or whatever. Yeah,
But so there's really nothing I can do. It's just one of those things we just got to stay tuned. Maybe follow my page and
yeah. Hey.
see where I go. I mean, because one of the things that's interesting is that we spend so much, time trying to act like we're not really beholden to social media as much, and that's because we know how to balance it with actual human interaction. And
Yeah.
now when we're faced with no human interaction,
Right,
this
right,
is like the thing to do, and
right.
that's how we keep in contact. You know what I mean? So it's all of a sudden it's not a bad thing. And also, when you do have something like Facebook Live or Instagram Live, you can go ahead and riff for as long as you want about any damn thing, and nobody's really gonna shut you down unless showing dick pics and titty pics and whatnot. Then it's it's a great thing, but you still have to watch yourself and how you come across and everything, because at some point this is gonna be over and it's gonna be back to going on the road. And now, people really start looking at character, right?
Yeah, if you say some shit, you might really have to own up to it in public
Yeah,
to somebody,
exactly.
coming up soon. Yeah. I think that's the thing. Social media does carry this like negative weight, especially when real social interaction is readily available. It's kind of like, for me, I can be on it too much, and you see what other people are doing, or you're comparing yourself, or maybe it's a thing about body image or whatever, or oh, this person's playing whatever. Like, we all go through that, and I got into that on the first episode of this podcast with Yoke and Rupert and Orlando. And I think now it does carry something different. I think Zoom, yeah, it's stealing all of our information right now and giving it to the government, and that's awful. But
Yeah,
um,
but that ain't nothing new, man.
yeah, man.
So that ain't nothing new.
Alexa been doing been doing that for.
That's just been way in the works before you knew what Alexa was. It's probably a real motherfucker named Alexa doing it. You know what I mean? That's just been for decades and decades. One of the things that was hip about Wallace, he hated it was a mood for him too. So whenever certain things arise, especially if it had to do with Miles, and people would be spouting whatever they thought they knew, and Wallace didn't feel like it, he would actually be sliding into my DMs and just like write these paragraphs of why everybody's wrong and what Tony told him and what Miles told him. And I'm like, and every time I say, Miles, you should tell people, man, no, I don't want to tell him what to get into, man, But he would just write these little fucking things down, and I have to say, that's the interesting thing.
That's a great story. That's some
Yeah,
real stuff. And if anybody would know about Miles, it would be him.
right.
Um, well, I think it's a good place to let off. I'm going to put this out probably this week. We're putting out a little bit more of the podcast episodes and the Zoom videos with different cats who have done it. Michael Perez, and I think Seamus Blake is going to do one this week. And
Right.
but be sure to check out Jeremy's music. Jeremy Pelt, the artist, is out, and The Art of Intimacy, Volume 1 with Peter Washington and George Gables.
Mm-hmm.
Be sure to check that out. And there's a bunch of great Jeremy Pelt records that I love with my old teacher, Mr. Dwayne Burno, on there. Men of Honor and Talented Mr. Pelt, right? So be sure to check out all those records.
Soul in November. Yeah.
Yeah, right. And check out all this stuff, Jeremy. Thanks for hanging out with us today, and I hope to see you in
Thanks a
real
lot, man.
life.
All right, man. I'll see you.
All
Thanks.
right, man.